Alex thought he was done running until an old journal in a forgotten cabin revealed a deeper story than he could ever have imagined. With his dog Max by his side, he unravels the mystery of a soldier's past and discovers a battle that could change everything. But the real challenge is not the war outside, but the one within. Will Alex find redemption? If you felt moved by Alex's journey, hit like and subscribe for more stories. The low hum of the engine was the only sound that kept Alex Mitchell company as he drove down the winding road, the city's skyline disappearing slowly in his rearview mirror. The weight in his chest felt like it was pressing against his ribs, making each breath more labored than the last. It had been 2 years since he lost Elena, and every morning felt like he was waking from a dream he couldn't quite remember, only to find himself in a world that seemed colder and more distant. The military had been his life for over a decade, and losing Elena had torn him in ways he couldn't explain to anyone. It was like a fog that never cleared. That's why he had to leave. He had to get away from the streets that echoed her laughter, the quiet house that smelled of her perfume, the places they used to go together, all reminders of what was lost. Max sat next to him, his dark brown eyes flickering with the same quiet understanding that had made them such a perfect team during their service. He hadn't been just a dog to Alex. He had been a protector, a companion, and now a reminder that no matter how dark things got, there was still something worth living for. The truck was old, its engine sputtering and groaning with every bump in the road, but Alex didn't care. He didn't need anything fancy. All he needed was space-time to breathe, time to forget. The road stretched out before them, endless and empty, just the way he wanted it. The cool air outside began to press against the window as the temperature dropped, a reminder of how far Alex had driven already. As the city faded into memory, so did the noise, the rush of people, the expectations of what he should do, and the constant buzz of life around him. It felt better than he expected. Peaceful. For once, there were no decisions to make, no timelines to meet. Just the endless stretch of road, the rhythmic hum of the truck, and Max's steady presence beside him. He glanced down at Max, who seemed as at ease as a dog could be in such a moving vehicle. His canine partner, once trained for danger, now looked almost serene, his muzzle resting comfortably against the seat. The scars on Max's body were reminders of battles fought and survived just like Alex. Both of them had seen things that made sleep elusive, but the connection between them was undeniable. Max, too, carried the weight of their shared past. Alex could feel the tension of the last few years start to melt away bit by bit the longer they drove. He wasn't sure where he was going exactly, but the need to just drive and keep going was stronger than any destination he could plan. He needed something new, a place where he could rebuild, even if he didn't know what that meant yet. The windshield wipers swished across the glass, clearing the thin layer of mist that had settled in the early morning hours. The highway was quiet, and every now and then a solitary figure of a bird would flit across the road, disappearing into the vast expanse of trees lining either side of the road. Everything was still. There was no one else on the road, and for the first time in what felt like years, Alex allowed himself to breathe, really breathe, without thinking of anything else. Max lifted his head as if sensing something ahead. His ears pricked up slightly, and he shifted, looking out the window. Alex glanced over, noting how alert his dog always was, even in the calmest of moments. They were a team, not just in the sense of military duty, but in a bond that ran much deeper. Max had never once questioned Alex's decisions, and he never would. Alex trusted him completely, just as he trusted no one else. The truck rounded a bend, and Alex spotted a sign for a small town up ahead. He wasn't sure why, but something about it felt right. The urge to stop to explore, to see if this was the place where he could start, fresh, bubbled up inside him. He slowed down, not ready to make a decision yet, but unwilling to keep moving without taking a chance. Max gave a soft whine, nudging Alex's hand as if to say, "We're here." Alex smiled faintly, the first hint of real emotion he'd allowed himself in months. He pulled off the road, the gravel crunching beneath the tires as he parked in a small clearing. The sky overhead was gray clouds, heavy with the promise of rain, but it didn't matter. The journey was as much about the road as it was about the destination. The truck came to a slow stop, the gravel crunching beneath the tires, breaking the deep silence of the forest. Alex Mitchell paused for a moment, staring ahead at the old cabin nestled between the trees. It wasn't much a rundown structure with a sagging roof, broken windows, and a porch that looked like it hadn't seen a soul in years. The trees surrounding it were tall and imposing, their branches twisting and reaching toward the sky, as if trying to protect the place from the outside world. But something about it drew him in, something he couldn't explain. He had been driving for hours, the miles, and the memories piling up on him, and he felt as if he had reached the end of a long road. Maybe it was just a random stop. Maybe it was fate, he didn't know. But as his eyes traced the edges of the cabin, he felt something stir inside him, a strange pull, almost like the house was calling to him. Max, his loyal German shepherd, sat silently beside him in the passenger seat, his amber eyes focused on the cabin, as if he too sensed the same thing. Alex couldn't explain it, but he couldn't ignore it either. He turned off the truck's engine, and for a moment the world outside was still. The only sound was the gentle hum of the wind through the trees and the soft breathing of Max, who was already waiting by the door. Stepping out of the truck, Alex was immediately greeted by the sharp, cool air of the forest, which seemed to surround him, wrapping around his body like a heavy blanket. The smell of pine and damp earth filled his lungs, and for a moment it felt like he was breathing again. The weight that had been pressing on his chest for so long felt just a little lighter. He walked toward the cabin, the ground beneath his boots soft with fallen needles, the leaves crunching underfoot. Max was already a few steps ahead, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. The dog was always alert, but today there was something different in the way he moved. His tail was held stiff, and his ears were slightly forward, as if something was out of place. Alex glanced back at the truck, unsure of what he was about to do. There was no reason to stop here. No reason to go inside. But the pull, the sense that something was waiting for him, wouldn't let him turn away. He stepped up onto the porch, the old wood creaking under his weight. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him stop for a moment. He could hear the house groaning as if it were settling into its place after years of silence. A heavy sigh of sorts, a response to his presence. He reached for the door, the handle cold under his hand, and pushed it open. The door creaked on rusty hinges, the sound echoing in the stillness of the cabin. Stepping inside, he was immediately hit by the smell of dust and decay. It was a smell that reminded him of old memories of forgotten places. The air was thick and heavy, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. The floorboards creaked as he moved further inside, the dust swirling around his feet. There was no sign of life here. Nothing that spoke of anyone having lived in this place for a long time. A broken chair lay in the corner, its legs bent awkwardly. A stove in the back corner sat rusted and forgotten, and a bird's nest had taken residence in the pipe that once vented the chimney. It was all forgotten, discarded, abandoned. But as he walked through the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a house. It was a piece of someone's past, a life that had been lived and left behind. The room was filled with relics, broken, faded, but still holding on to memories of what once was. Alex felt drawn to the far wall, where a photograph hung crookedly, its frame cracked and chipped with age. He stepped closer, his heart skipping a beat when he saw the faces. A man, a woman, and a young child, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Their smiles were frozen in time, but there was something about them that made Alex stop in his tracks. He stared at the image, his mind racing, his heart beating faster. The faces seemed so familiar, like a ghost from the past, someone he had known, or someone he should have known. It was strange, almost unsettling. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck rise, a deep, inexplicable sense of recognition flooding through him. But before he could make sense of it, Max let out a low growl from the door. Alex turned, and for a moment he felt a jolt of fear. The dog's stance was tense, his body rigid with alertness. Max didn't growl unless there was something serious. Alex walked toward the dog, his boots tapping softly against the floor. As he reached the doorway, he looked back at the photograph, but it was already starting to fade in his memory, replaced by the unsettling feeling in the pit of his stomach. Something was wrong here, something he couldn't explain. He stepped outside, the cold air rushing in to meet him. Max padded alongside him, still alert, his gaze never leaving the trees. Alex stood there for a moment, staring back at the cabin, his heart heavy with 1,000 unasked questions. What was this place? Why did it feel like he had been here before? Why did it feel like the past was waiting for him? Max's tail swayed slightly, his usual calm demeanor returning as they stood together in the quiet. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. This place wasn't just abandoned, it was calling to him, and he couldn't walk away now. It had been 2 weeks since Alex first laid eyes on the old cabin, and with each passing day, it seemed to breathe new life under his hands. The weathered wood of the walls creaked as he replaced broken planks with fresh timber, the faint smell of sawdust filling the air, mixing with the earthy scent of the forest. The roof, once sagging and rotting, was slowly being restored. Alex worked tirelessly from dawn until dusk, each swing of the hammer and turn of the wrench, bringing the house closer to the refuge he had imagined it could become. Max, ever by his side, watched the progress with a quiet understanding, his amber eyes alert to every movement. The dog would occasionally bark to alert Alex to a loose nail or a spot where the wind had started to creep through. They were a team just like they had always been. It wasn't just the house that was coming back to life. It was Alex, too. With each repair, the weight in his chest began to lift, and for the first time in what felt like years, he wasn't consumed by thoughts of Elena or the endless battles he had fought in his mind. Instead, he was focused on something tangible, something real, something that could be touched and seen. This house, broken and abandoned, had become a mirror for him, its scars matching his own. But now, as he worked, it slowly transformed before his eyes, and in doing so, so did he. There was something deeply healing about fixing what had been forgotten. The work was physical, demanding, but also incredibly cathartic. Each time he swung the hammer or repaired a window, it felt as if he were hammering away at the pieces of his past that still haunted him. Slowly, piece by piece, the cabin became more than just a structure. It became a home, a place of refuge, a place where he could begin to rebuild himself. One afternoon, while Max was off exploring the woods nearby, Alex found himself crouching on the floor of the cabin, smoothing the floorboards where years of neglect had left their mark. As his hand passed over the wood, he noticed something odd, an indentation in the floor that didn't seem right. Curiosity piqued. He moved a few planks aside to investigate further. Beneath the wood, hidden from view, was a small hole. He carefully reached inside, his fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. It was buried deep beneath the layers of dust and decay, but there was no mistaking it. There was something hidden down there. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He could feel his pulse quicken as he carefully began to dig around the object. The hole was small, but his fingers found purchase on what appeared to be a rusted box, its surface worn but solid. With a few more careful movements, Alex pried the box free, the metal creaking and groaning as if it had been asleep for decades. When it was finally free, Alex stared at the small, rusted container in his hands, his breath held in anticipation. He didn't know why, but a sense of urgency washed over him, as if whatever was inside this box might hold the key to something important, something he had been unknowingly searching for. He wiped off the dirt and grime that had accumulated on the surface, revealing the faded engravings on the box. A symbol, a droplet of water, was etched into the metal, and underneath it, the faint outline of a map. His fingers trembled slightly as he ran them over the engraving, the significance of it lost on him for a moment. But then the weight of the moment hit him. This wasn't just any random find. This was a clue, something that connected him to this place in a way he couldn't yet understand. He carefully opened the box, the hinges squealing with resistance. Inside were several tattered pieces of paper, each one old and brittle with age. As he unfolded them carefully, his eyes scanned the contents. The first paper was a map, one that seemed to mirror the layout of the forest surrounding the cabin. The second, a set of coordinates written in faint ink. The third, a cryptic note in a handwriting he didn't recognize. "Protect what gives life," it read. Alex's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what he was holding. The map, the coordinates, the mysterious note, it all pointed to something deeper, something hidden within the land he had stumbled upon. But what the idea that there was something more to this cabin, something buried beneath its foundations, filled him with both excitement and unease. Why had it been hidden here beneath the floorboards of a place no one had visited in years? What had the person before him been protecting? The sound of Max's bark broke him from his thoughts, and he stood up quickly, the box clutched tightly in his hands. The dog had returned, and Alex knew it was time to think about the next step. But even as he turned to leave the map, and the strange note stayed with him. They were more than just relics of a forgotten past. They were a call to action, a mystery that had to be unraveled. He couldn't leave the answers buried here. Not yet. There was more to this story, more to the land, more to the cabin, and Alex was determined to find it no matter what it took. Max, wagging his tail, trotted over to him, oblivious to the weight of the discovery. Alex reached down, ruffling the dog's fur, as a feeling of determination settled over him. He had come here to escape, to heal, but now he realized the journey was far from over. Something had been left behind, and he was the one who would have to uncover it. Alex sat at the small wooden table inside the cabin, the dim light from the oil lamp casting long shadows across the room. The air smelled of fresh timber and old dust, a strange combination that felt oddly comforting. The box he had uncovered was now open before him. The old maps spread across the table, their edges tattered and yellowed with age. He had spent hours studying them, but they didn't make much sense. The maps were not like any he had ever seen. They didn't mark specific landmarks or locations, no names or streets, nothing that was recognizable. Instead, they seemed to be drawings of the forest surrounding the cabin with lines and symbols etched carefully into the fragile paper. Some of the markings looked like ridges or valleys, others like paths or trails that wound through the woods in intricate patterns. There was no key, no legend, no explanation to make sense of it. Still, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that these maps were important. They were more than just paper. They were a clue to something hidden, something waiting to be discovered. As his fingers traced the curves of the lines on the maps, his mind began to wander, imagining what might lie beyond the trees deeper into the forest. The more he studied them, the more a strange sense of familiarity began to wash over him. It was as if the maps were speaking to him, guiding him to a destination he hadn't yet realized he was seeking. Max, lying quietly beside him, shifted slightly, his amber eyes focused on the maps, as if he too was trying to understand what Alex was seeing. The dog's steady gaze reminded Alex that he wasn't alone in this journey, that he had someone with him who trusted him implicitly, who followed him without question. But this journey was different. This wasn't just about survival or escaping the past. This was about discovery, about uncovering something that had been hidden for a long time. There was a purpose behind these maps, a purpose that Alex hadn't fully understood yet, but he was determined to find out. The room felt strangely still, the only sound the soft rustle of the paper as Alex shifted it across the table. As he continued to examine the maps, his hand brushed against one of the edges, and for a brief moment a shiver ran down his spine. The sensation was fleeting but intense, like an electric pulse that connected him to something far beyond this cabin, beyond the maps, beyond even the forest. It was a strange, unexplainable feeling, like a whisper from the past urging him to continue. And he realized then that he wasn't just looking at maps. He was looking at a journey, one that he couldn't turn away from. With a deep breath, Alex pushed the maps aside and stood up, his mind made up. This wasn't just about fixing a house anymore. It was about something larger, something more meaningful. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that whatever lay ahead in the forest, whatever secrets were hidden there, were meant for him to find. He had come here to escape the weight of his past, to find peace in the stillness of nature. But now the journey had changed. It wasn't about forgetting anymore. It was about uncovering the truth, about seeking something that had been buried long before he arrived. Max raised his head, sensing the shift in Alex's mood. The dog's ears perked up, and he gave a soft, low whine, as if acknowledging the unspoken change between them. Alex gave him a gentle smile, a faint but real connection forming between them. He didn't know what he would find in the forest, or where the maps would lead him, but for the first time in months he felt a sense of purpose, a sense of hope. The forest outside was silent, the trees standing tall like ancient guardians, their branches swaying gently in the wind. It was as if they were waiting too, waiting for something, or perhaps someone, to come and uncover the mysteries they held. Alex took one last look at the maps, the lines and symbols now etched into his mind. He knew the time had come to follow them, to step into the unknown, and face whatever lay ahead. The past had shaped him, but it no longer had control over him. The journey ahead would be his own, and with that thought, Alex and Max left the cabin behind, stepping into the woods, into the unknown. As they moved deeper into the forest, the air grew cooler, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of pine needles beneath their feet. The trees seemed to close in around them, but there was a strange sense of freedom, of release. Alex felt as if he was finally shedding the weight of his past, leaving it behind, in the cabin in the house he had rebuilt. Now there was only the present, only the path ahead, and the maps that had brought him here. He didn't know where they would lead him or what he would find, but one thing was certain: he wasn't running away anymore. He was moving toward something, toward a truth that had been hidden in the forest, buried under layers of time and memory. And whatever that truth was, Alex knew he had to find it. The forest surrounding the cabin was quiet, but it was a quiet that was thick with anticipation, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Alex had spent most of the day poring over the maps, his mind spinning with the possibilities of what they might lead to. There were no immediate answers, no clear path forward, but the maps felt important, like a treasure map to something lost, something forgotten. Max had been quiet for most of the afternoon, a stark contrast to his usual alertness, and Alex didn't think much of it at first. He was too focused on the shifting lines on the pages before him, tracing the strange markings with his fingers, trying to make sense of the symbols that seemed to weave in and out of the paper. But as dusk began to fall, he noticed that Max was acting differently. The dog, who had been lying near the fire, suddenly stood up and started pacing restlessly around the cabin. His ears were perked, his head tilted as if listening to something just beyond the range of Alex's hearing. Alex frowned and looked up from the maps. "What is it, boy?" he asked softly. But Max didn't respond. Instead, the dog's body was tense and his eyes darted toward the window. His tail was rigid, not the relaxed wag Alex was used to. Max's anxiety was palpable, and for the first time since they had arrived, Alex felt a flicker of unease himself. Alex stood and moved toward the door, his footsteps heavy on the floorboards. Max followed him, still restless, and stood near the door, his nose pressed against the wood. Alex opened the door slightly, peering out into the gathering night. There was nothing, just the dense shadows of the trees and the eerie quiet of the wilderness. But Max continued to act, strangely pacing in tight circles and sniffing the air as if something was out there, something Alex couldn't see or hear. Alex stepped back, his eyes scanning the darkening landscape. He didn't know what had caused Max's sudden anxiety, but the feeling lingered. "All right, buddy," Alex muttered, closing the door. "Let's get some rest." The unease, however, didn't dissipate. Something was off, and it gnawed at the edges of his thoughts as he sat back down to continue his work. Later that night, when the cabin had sunk into darkness and the crackling of the fire was the only sound, Alex tried to sleep. He lay on the makeshift bed, the woolen blanket wrapped around him, but sleep refused to come. He tossed and turned, his mind restless, Too many thoughts tangled together to allow him any peace. Max, however, was unusually still curled up at the foot of the bed, eyes closed. At least the dog was calm again, but that strange feeling, the one that had crept up on Alex during the day, had only grown stronger. He closed his eyes, trying to force himself to relax. But then he heard the faintest sound of something moving outside. It was barely perceptible, like a twig snapping underfoot or a leaf brushing against the cabin, but it was enough to jolt Alex awake. He lay perfectly still, listening. The sound came again, louder this time. It was unmistakable. Someone or something was out there. His heart rate quickened as he pushed himself up, eyes scanning the dark room. Max was on his feet now, his head raised, his eyes fixed on the window. The dog's low growl broke the silence, a rumble deep in his chest that sent a chill down Alex's spine. Max was no stranger to danger, but the growl he made now was different. It was wary, as if whatever was out there wasn't just an animal, but something more, something unfamiliar. Alex moved quietly towards the window, his hand on the edge of the curtains. The forest outside was cloaked in darkness, the shadows of the trees stretching long and ghostly in the moonlight. He couldn't see anything, but the feeling of being watched was overpowering. His instincts told him to move, to act, but the cabin's thick walls seemed to hold him back. The air felt thick with tension, and the silence outside seemed to stretch longer than it should. Max's growl turned into a low bark, sharp and insistent. Alex's breath caught in his throat, and for the first time since he had come to this place, he felt a deep sense of fear creeping up his spine. It wasn't the fear of the past, of war or loss, but something primal, a fear of being hunted, of being watched by something he couldn't understand. He stepped back from the window, his mind racing, heart pounding in his chest. Max's eyes never left the window, his ears alert, his body tense and ready to spring into action. Alex wasn't sure how long he stood there, watching the dog, feeling the pressure of the unknown. The forest outside was silent again, as if whatever had been lurking in the darkness had vanished. But the unease in Alex's chest remained heavy and thick. He glanced at the door, then at the window. It was as if the night itself had come alive, watching, waiting. What the hell was that, Alex whispered to himself. But there was no answer, only the sound of his own breath in the stillness. Max's growl softened, but his watchful eyes never left the darkness outside. Something had changed. Something was out there. Alex didn't know what it was yet, but whatever it was not ready to reveal itself, and neither was he. The feeling of being watched lingered, and Alex knew that the next steps in his journey would lead him into a place far darker than he had anticipated. He only hoped he was ready. Alex stood for a moment in front of the old weathered door. The key in his hand felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the weight of something beyond just metal and rust. He hadn't meant to find this place not like this, not with so many unanswered questions still hanging over him. But the feeling that had drawn him to the first cabin, the pull that had brought him here, was impossible to ignore. It was as if the key itself had chosen this moment, this time, to guide him deeper into the mystery. He hadn't thought much about the key at first, only that it had been hidden away in a small metal box beneath the cabin, a relic of someone else's life. But now, standing in front of this door, the key seemed to symbolize something far larger than he had anticipated, something tied to the forest, to the maps, to whatever secrets lay buried beneath the soil he had spent so much time walking on. He took a deep breath, pushed the key into the lock, and turned. The door creaked open with a reluctant groan, the hinges protesting the intrusion after years of silence. Stepping inside, Alex was immediately struck by the stillness. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of aged wood, but it didn't feel abandoned. It felt watched, as though the house itself had been waiting for him to arrive. The room was small, and the light from the setting sun filtered through the cracked windows, casting long, jagged shadows across the floor. It wasn't much, just a few old pieces of furniture covered in cobwebs, a faded rug in the center of the room, and the remnants of a fire that had long since gone cold. The walls seemed to close in around him, but there was something oddly familiar about it, something he couldn't place. His footsteps echoed in the silence as he walked deeper into the house, his mind racing. The room felt like a mirror of his own mind, empty, yet filled with ghosts of the past. As he explored the small space, his eyes landed on a shelf in the far corner. There, tucked behind a stack of old, faded books, was a small, leather-bound journal. Something about it called to him. He reached for it, his fingers brushing the cover, and as soon as he touched it, a surge of recognition hit him. He didn't know why, but this journal felt important. He sat down on the nearest chair and opened it carefully, the pages brittle with age. The first few pages were filled with what looked like random notes, sketches of the forest, observations about the animals, and descriptions of the terrain. But as he flipped through, something caught his eye. There, near the back of the journal, was a series of passages that seemed to be more than just observations. They were stories about the forest, about the land surrounding the cabin, and about someone who had come here long before Alex had. It seemed that the writer had been searching for something too. But what the journal spoke of a hidden truth buried deep within the forest, something that had been kept secret for generations. The words hinted at a mysterious guard of the land, someone who had protected the forest and its secrets, someone who had left clues behind for the right person to find. And at the end of one of the entries, in a rushed, almost frantic hand, were the words, "The secret lies in the earth itself. Protect it, for it's more than just a place, it is life itself." Alex's heart began to race. He had read those words over and over, but they didn't make sense. Protect it. What was he supposed to protect? What life was the journal referring to? And why had it been left here, in this forgotten house, buried beneath layers of dust and time? His eyes kept scanning the rest of the pages, but they all seemed to circle back to the same theme: the forest, the land, and the secrets that were hidden beneath it. It was as if the journal had been left here for someone to find someone who would understand its meaning, someone like him. Alex sat back in the chair, his mind spinning. The journal had revealed something crucial. It was a clue, a piece of a much larger puzzle. But the deeper question was, why him? Why had the forest drawn him in? What did he have to do with this life the journal referred to? The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like he had stumbled into something he wasn't meant to find, something that had been hidden away for a reason. And yet the pull was undeniable. The forest had chosen him just as it had chosen the person who had written these pages. It was a calling he couldn't ignore no matter how much he wanted to. He stood up, the journal still in his hands, and moved to the small window overlooking the trees. The sun had almost set, and the forest outside seemed to glow with an ethereal light. The shadows between the trees stretched longer, deeper, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Max padded softly beside him, his head resting against Alex's leg, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Alex's fingers clenched around the journal, his resolve hardening. He didn't know where this journey would take him. But one thing was clear: he was no longer just running from his past. He was running towards something bigger than himself. And whatever it was, whatever secrets the forest held, he would uncover them. The feeling of being watched, of something lurking in the shadows, was stronger than ever. But now it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an invitation. And Alex, for the first time in a long while, was ready to accept it. The discovery of the journal had changed everything. What had started as a simple restoration of an old abandoned house had turned into something deeper, more profound. Alex stood in the dim light of the cabin, holding the leather-bound journal in his hands, its pages now worn and fragile, yet filled with words that seemed to call out to him from the past. The journal belonged to the previous owner of the house, a man who, it turned out, had been a soldier just like Alex. But not just any soldier. This man had lived a life of sacrifice, of battles fought both in and out of war, and had carried a burden that Alex could only begin to understand. The entries in the journal spoke of a war that had never truly ended, of demons that lingered long after the last shot had been fired. The man who had lived here had fought not just on foreign soil, but in his mind, struggling with memories that would never fade. His words, written in a hurried scrawl, spoke of the battles that were not over, and the treasures hidden beneath the earth, treasures that were somehow connected to the very land Alex had chosen to settle in. But there was more. At the back of the journal, one passage stood out. The war never ends. The prize is buried in the earth. I leave it behind for the right hands to find. It is a burden, but it must be passed on. Alex felt a chill run down his spine as he read those words again. A prize buried in the earth. What was this man talking about? And why had he left it for someone else to find? It was clear now this wasn't just a journal of a soldier's past. It was a record of a secret that had been hidden away for a reason, and Alex had somehow stumbled into the heart of it. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned another page. As he did, a photograph fell out from between the creased pages. The image was old, faded with time, but still clear enough for Alex to make out. The man from the journal was standing in front of the cabin, smiling with a woman at his side. Behind them was a child, a young boy no older than 8 or 9. The caption below the photo read, "The last battle won." Alex stared at the photo for a long time, the faces of the family before him so full of life, now frozen in time. The photograph felt heavy in his hands, as if it carried the weight of all that had come before. This man, this soldier, had fought for something much more than just survival. He had fought for peace, for a future for his family. And now it seemed that battle was far from over. Max, who had been lying quietly at Alex's feet, stood up suddenly. His ears perked. The dog seemed to sense the shift in the air, the gravity of the discovery that Alex had just made. As Alex looked down at the journal again, a thought struck him. What if he was part of this soldier's story? What if this was all connected in ways he couldn't yet understand? Had fate led him here to this house, to this land, to uncover the secrets that had been buried for so long? Alex closed the journal, his heart pounding in his chest. The cabin, once just a place of refuge, now felt like the center of something much larger, much more dangerous. He wasn't just fixing a house anymore. He wasn't just escaping his own demons. He had become part of a story that had been written long before he arrived. And in that moment, Alex realized that the journey ahead of him wasn't just about healing. It wasn't just about finding peace. It was about understanding, about unraveling the past in order to face the future. The soldiers' war, it seemed, had never truly ended, and now Alex was part of that fight. A fight he didn't know he was meant to be in, but a fight he couldn't ignore. The wind outside began to pick up, rustling the trees in the forest like whispers, and Alex stood up, pacing the cabin floor. The sense of purpose that had begun to grow in him felt stronger now, like a current pulling him forward. The house, the journal, the family, everything was connected. But there was still so much left to discover. What was this buried treasure? What had the soldier left behind for Alex to find? And why did he feel so strongly that he was meant to be the one to find it? Max padded over to Alex's side, looking up at him with those knowing eyes. The bond between them was unspoken, but Alex could feel it. The dog had been through the darkness with him, and now they were both heading into something even darker. They weren't just two lost souls trying to find their way anymore. They were part of something larger, part of a story that was far from over. Alex stepped toward the door, the journal still in his hand. The past was waiting for him just outside. The forest, the land, the secrets, it was all connected, and he couldn't turn back now. The next step in his journey was clear, but it was also fraught with uncertainty. Whatever lay ahead, Alex knew that he wasn't just running from his own demons anymore. He was stepping into a story that had been waiting for him, a story that was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And with Max by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. Alex's fingers trembled as he held the letter, the faint scrawl of ink on the yellowed paper, almost blurring under the pressure of his grip. The man who had handed it to him was gone, disappearing into the trees as quickly as he had come, leaving Alex standing in the doorway of the cabin, the wind howling through the open space like a warning. It wasn't the first time Alex had felt something like this, an overwhelming sense of being part of something much larger than himself. But this letter, this message felt different. It wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a call to action, one that Alex wasn't sure he was ready to answer. He glanced down at the envelope, again his mind racing. The handwriting was familiar, though he couldn't place it at first. It was precise, deliberate, much like the notes he had found in the journal, the words he had read over and over. The letter spoke of a final battle, of something hidden deep within the earth, something worth fighting for. The soldiers' war had never truly ended, and Alex was now caught in its wake. The letter urged him to come to join the fight, to protect the thing the soldier had guarded so fiercely. There was a promise in it, an assurance that whatever was hidden beneath the soil would change everything. But at what cost? Alex looked out the window, the forest stretching out before him, silent and unyielding. His thoughts drifted back to the journal, to the words of the soldier who had written of battles fought and secrets kept. The soldier had been desperate to pass on the burden, and now it seemed that burden had found its way to Alex. But was he ready for it? Was he ready to face whatever darkness lay beneath the earth, beneath the forest, beneath the very ground he had come to call home? The choice seemed simple: walk away, live his life in peace. Forget about the war that had shaped him and the soldier who had gone before him. Or take the letter's instructions, dive deeper into the unknown, and face whatever ghosts were left behind. The cabin, once a place of refuge, now felt like a trap, its walls closing in on him with the weight of the decision. He hadn't expected this when he had first arrived, when he had first stepped into the quiet forest, away from the noise of the world. But now it seemed that peace was something he would never find, not in this place, not with this secret buried in the land beneath him. He walked over to the table, where the journal still lay open, its pages filled with the soldier's final words. The secret lies within. The soldier had written his words almost prophetic. To protect it is to protect all that we know. Alex stood there staring at the words, and for the first time in a long while he felt the weight of the past come crashing down on him. It wasn't just the soldier's past, it was his own. The battles, the losses, the grief. It was all tangled together in this place, and now it was all leading him down a path he wasn't sure he could follow. Max padded over to his side, his eyes calm, but filled with understanding. The dog had been there for everything, through the dark times, through the quiet moments of doubt. Alex reached down and ruffled Max's fur, the familiar comfort of the dog grounding him. "I don't know if I can do this," Alex whispered, "but I don't think I have a choice." The sound of the wind outside filled the silence between them. The forest was waiting. The war was waiting. And now Alex knew that his past would no longer let him go. He had always been running from something, from his own demons, from the pain of his memories, but now the choice was clear. The question wasn't whether he could escape. The question was whether he could face what was coming. The letter still in his hand seemed to burn with purpose. The man who had handed it to him had said nothing, only left him with the words, "It's time to protect what's buried. You've already begun." Alex took one last look at the cabin, his home for what had seemed like a brief respite. But it wasn't just a home anymore. It was part of a much larger story, one that he had to finish. He had already stepped into it. Now he would have to see it through. With a final glance at the letter, Alex folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket. The weight of it, heavy with meaning, pressed against his chest. He wasn't sure what would come next, what battle, what war, what hidden secret was waiting to be uncovered, but one thing was certain: he would not face it alone. Max was beside him, as always ready to walk into the unknown. Alex's resolve hardened. He wasn't just running from his past anymore. He was running toward something. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew he had to find out. The door creaked softly as Alex stepped out into the cold night air. The moonlight bathed the forest in an ethereal glow, casting long shadows across the ground. The forest was no longer just the quiet backdrop to his search for peace. It was alive, full of secrets waiting for him to uncover them. Max stood at his side, the dog's gaze fixed on the path ahead. Whatever the next steps held, Alex knew one thing for certain: there was no turning back now. The forest was eerily silent as Alex stepped forward, Max at his side, ready for whatever came next. The decision had been made. He wasn't turning back. The letter, the journal, the mysterious man, everything had led to this moment. The war, the hidden truth, the burden that had been passed to him, it was all too much to ignore now. There was no running, no escape. The choices he had made had brought him to this point, and now, in the quiet depths of the woods, Alex felt a shift in his spirit. He had spent so many years trying to outrun his past, running from the things that haunted him, from the memories of a life lost to violence and war. But today, that life was catching up to him, and for the first time he was ready to face it. He could no longer hide from himself. The soldier, the man who had fought beside him in another life, had left behind a legacy, one that Alex had now become a part of. The weight of the past, the burden of secrets, it was all here waiting for him to pick up the pieces. The thing was, Alex realized he didn't have to carry that weight alone. Not anymore. Max, his loyal companion, had been with him through it all. And now, as they moved deeper into the forest, Alex felt the dog's presence beside him, a constant reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. As they approached the clearing where the battle would unfold, Alex's thoughts were interrupted by a voice from behind. "You're not alone, you know." Alex turned to find a man standing a few paces behind him. He was tall, wiry, his face lined with age and experience. His eyes, though, were sharp, alert, and he wore the look of someone who had seen more than his fair share of darkness. "I knew you'd come," the man said with a half-smile, a distant memory of battles fought flickering behind his gaze. "I'm James," he added, extending a hand. Alex shook at his grip firm. There was something in the man's demeanor that calmed him, as if he had been waiting for this moment too. "I'm not sure what you've been told," James continued, "but we're not here to fight for treasure. We're here to protect something that can't be measured in gold or jewels, something far more valuable, something we've been protecting for years." Alex's curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low but steady. James's eyes darkened as he spoke, his tone more serious now. "It's a treasure of the soul, something that has been passed down for generations, something that's kept the balance in this land. The man who lived here before you knew about it, and he made sure it stayed hidden. The fight we're about to face isn't about survival, it's about protecting the very essence of life itself, a force that can change everything." The words were cryptic, but they struck a chord in Alex. The burden wasn't just his, wasn't just about his past, it was about something larger, something that held the key to everything. The land, the forest, the secrets hidden beneath it. "All this has always been about something greater than war," James said, as if reading Alex's thoughts. "This isn't just a fight against enemies you can see, Alex. It's about protecting something intangible, something so vital that without it everything else would fall apart. And you're a part of that now." Alex felt the weight of those words sink into him, deep into his bones. He had spent so much time fighting for the wrong things, for vengeance, for peace, in a world that seemed to offer neither. But now, standing here with James, he felt like he had a purpose, something far more important than anything he had imagined when he first stepped into the forest. "I'm in," Alex said, his voice firm, stronger than he had heard it in years. He wasn't just running away from his past anymore. He wasn't just trying to find a way out. He was standing up not just for himself, but for something much larger than himself. He was part of a story, a fight that had been unfolding for generations. And now it was his turn to take part. James nodded a silent acknowledgement of the decision Alex had made. He turned and began to lead the way into the deeper part of the forest, his steps deliberate, his eyes scanning the surroundings as if he were preparing for something. Alex followed Max right beside him, the dog's steady presence reassuring him that this was the right path. As they walked deeper into the woods, the air grew heavier, the silence more oppressive. The forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "What's the next step?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would break the fragile calm that hung in the air. "We'll face them together," James replied. "But remember, this isn't just about fighting. It's about protecting the balance. What we're doing here isn't just for us. It's for everyone." Alex nodded, a sense of resolve settling in his chest. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was part of something larger than himself. The burden of his past no longer felt like a weight to carry alone. He was connected to something greater, something that needed him just as much as he needed it. Max's tail flicked against his leg, as if in agreement, and Alex couldn't help but smile. He had found his place. He wasn't running anymore. He was fighting, standing up for something worth protecting. The forest whispered around them as they moved forward, and Alex felt a deep sense of peace within himself. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready. The wind howled through the trees as Alex stood at the edge of the clearing, looking out over the battlefield. The forest was eerily quiet now, the sounds of battle replaced by the soft rustling of leaves in the aftermath. The fight had been fierce, but in the end they had won. They had fought not just for survival, but for something much greater, something that had been worth protecting all along. Alex's heart still pounded in his chest, the adrenaline from the fight still coursing through his veins. But as he stood there, looking over the ground where so much had happened, he felt something else too, a deep, profound peace. He wasn't the same man who had walked into these woods weeks ago. The burden of his past, the ghosts of the wars he had fought, and the losses he had endured no longer weighed him down. He had faced them, and in doing so he had found something far more valuable than peace. He had found strength, purpose, and the courage to move forward. Max stood by his side, his loyal companion eyes alert but calm. The dog had been with him through it all, never wavering, never leaving him. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a symbol of everything Alex had fought for, everything he had come to realize. As Alex bent down to scratch the dog behind the ears, he felt a rush of gratitude. Max had been there from the very beginning, guiding him, protecting him, and now standing beside him, he had become the final piece of a puzzle that Alex hadn't known he was trying to solve. The battle was over, but the journey was just beginning. Alex wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew he would face it with the same determination that had carried him through the fight. He had learned, perhaps for the first time in his life, that victory wasn't just about winning the war. It was about accepting the past, embracing it, and moving forward with it as part of who you are. The war had never truly ended. It had simply transformed into something else, something that had driven him to find his purpose. Now that purpose was clear. He wasn't just surviving, he was living. He turned away from the clearing and began walking back toward the cabin, Max trotting at his side. The house, which had once seemed like a place of solitude and escape, now felt like something else, something more. It was a home, a symbol of rebirth, a place where both he and the land could heal. The repairs, the struggles, the discoveries, they had all led him here. The cabin was no longer just a refuge. It was a testament to his journey, to everything he had fought for, and everything he had come to understand. As he reached the porch, he paused for a moment, looking back at the forest behind him. The trees stood tall and unyielding, but now Alex saw them differently. They weren't just the backdrop to his life. They were part of it. They were the living, breathing witness to everything he had become. The key to the treasure, the journey, the war had always been within him. And now, with Max by his side, he had finally found it. He opened the door to the cabin, and as he stepped inside, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. The air inside was warm, the familiar scent of wood and fire filling his senses. It wasn't just the physical warmth, it was the warmth of acceptance of home. This place was no longer a place to escape. It was a place to stay. Alex sank into the chair by the fire, his gaze wandering over the room. The journal, the maps, the photographs, they were all scattered across the table, pieces of the story that had led him here. But now they felt like history, his history. He was no longer a man running from something. He was a man running toward something. He had faced his demons, and in doing so, he had found redemption. Max lay down at his feet, curling up beside him with a contented sigh. Alex reached down, running his fingers through the dog's fur. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, he felt at peace. The battles, the losses, the pain, those things would always be a part of him. But they no longer defined him. He had found his purpose not in the things he had fought for, but in the people he had become. The house, the forest, and Max, They were no longer just pieces of his past. They were his present, his future. And in that moment, Alex knew that he had finally found home. Not just in the cabin, not just in the forest, but in himself. The journey had brought him here, and though the road ahead was unknown, Alex was ready to face it because he knew that whatever came next, he wouldn't be facing it alone. As Alex sat by the fire, the weight of his journey lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a sense of peace he never thought possible. The battles had been fought, the truths uncovered, and with Max by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. The road ahead was still unknown, but for the first time in his life, Alex felt he was no longer running, he was truly living. What moment in Alex's journey resonated most with you? Was it his decision to face the past, or his realization that peace comes from within? Share your thoughts below. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring tales that remind us all of the power of redemption and courage.